Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is our last Profiles of Mission for this semester, and we are very excited to gather and reflect a little bit on stories of beauty. And we have two amazing faculty members who can share with us their own reflections on beauty. But before we do that, I'd like to begin with a poem by Sister Madaliva. And this poem is called November Afternoons. Now they have come, these afternoons in November, when all the air is still and branches are bare, and the long, lovely light that I remember invades with luminous peace the untroubled air. Off to the west, a dozen trees together stand in gray loveliness, bemused with light. Slender and silver, they stand in the autumn weather, waiting the inevitable winter, the inevitable night. Blossoming light they bear as a single flower, and silence more singing sweet than a lone bird's call. Off to the west I stand, sharing their hour, at peace with beauty and needing no song at all. So we have two wonderful presenters today, Ian Weaver and Sister Eva Mary Hooker. I guess your first name only had to be 3 letters long if you were going to present at this particular Profiles in Mission. We have very strict requirements. And Ian will go first, and then Sister Eva second, and then we'll have time for questions or comments, or maybe you'd like to share your own story of beauty. Ian Weaver is an artist and associate professor at St. Mary's College. His MFA is from Washington University in St. Louis. He has exhibited nationally, including at the St. Louis Art Museum, SLAM, the Chicago Cultural Center, Fort Worth Contemporary, and the Fort Worth Contemporary Arts. His residencies include the Bemis Center for the Contemporary Arts, the International Studio and Curatorial Program in New York, and Yaddo and the Malay Colony, which are both in upstate New York. Weaver's awards include the DeHaan Artist of Distinction Award, the Stone and DeGuire Contemporary Art Award, and the Joan Mitchell Foundation, New York, and the Illinois Arts Council. He is in the collection of the Studio Museum in Harlem, New York, the St. Louis Art Museum in St. Louis, Missouri, and the Duke Wellington School for the Arts in Washington, D.C. The Illinois State Museum in Springfield, Illinois, and then he also has many other private collections in St. Louis, Alabama, Roll Tide, New York, and Los Angeles. Thank you so much for being here, Ian. And I'll go ahead and introduce Sister Eva too, so you guys can just go back to back. Sister Eva Mary Hooker joined the Holy Cross community in 1960 and graduated from St. Mary's in 1963. She then earned a PhD at the State University of New York, spending a year of her graduate studies at Oxford University. After completing her graduate studies, Sister Eva made her first return to St. Mary's in 1973 to teach medieval and Renaissance literature. Then serving as the Associate Dean here at St. Mary's, and then as Dean of Faculty at St. John's University. In 2006, she retired from St. John's and, of course, returned to St. Mary's, rejoining the English department as a professor and writer in residence, where she was finally able to make the writing of her own words of love a top priority. She stayed closely connected to student life by truly being in residence here, living in an apartment at Holy Cross Hall. This past academic year, she officially retired. And then we brought her back. So please give a warm welcome to Ian.
How's everybody doing? Good? So get established here. And I'm primarily going to be reading here, so I'm going to don my glasses because I can't really see anymore. So first, I wanted to thank Julianne for inviting me to participate in this series. I also wanted to thank Mary Porter for organizing the event, and really all the members of the mission. So I was really excited to hear about this and be a part of this series. In particular, I was excited to be presenting with Sister Eva. So that's been one of my real goals in being here, is being on the same stage with Sister Eva. I thought I'd start by saying a little bit about myself. I think I know most of the people. I can't really see that way. I think I know most of the people here in the room for the most part, but so my name's Ian Weaver. Obviously, I teach in the art department. I also run the Moreau Art Gallery in Moreau Hall. Hopefully you come out and see some shows. I am originally from Chicago, and I taught for about 5 years at the School of the Art Institute. So I was really excited to come here. It's a big change for me coming from Chicago to South Bend. And I think it's grown on me. It's been 10 years, but it's grown on me. And so I'm really excited to be here and talk about some of the moments that I would consider to be moments of beauty in the years that I've been here. So with that said, I guess I should start by saying that I really don't have a story of beauty, unfortunately. I also don't have an adequate definition of beauty. So maybe that's a downer way to begin this lecture, but I thought I would start by looking at the way others throughout history have defined beauty. And of course, someone like Aristotle comes to mind. Aristotle believed beauty was something tangible, that it could be measured. I have to disagree. I found beauty in so many different aspects in my life, and I've organized this short talk and slide lecture based on some of those moments. If there was an example of beauty as defined in the past that I do relate to, it would probably be the sublime movement epitomized by landscape painters. These artists found awe, wonder, and amazement, and terror in nature, and created works in which people were significantly smaller in scale to the surrounding landscape, emphasizing the sheer scale of the nature of the sublime. So I have a few images. I'll kind of talk, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the images I have here. This first image is of Caspar David Friedrich, a German 19th century painter. It's kind of one of the most iconic images of the sublime movement. And I guess one of the things I can talk about really quickly is there's always this relationship of the person, man, but the person in relation to the landscape, either in confronting the landscape, being in awe of the landscape, or being significantly scaled down from the scale of the landscape. And you'll see that in these other works. And this is the Peter Bruegel, the Elder. So you can see the smaller figures in the foreground there, and then the expanse of the landscape. And then the British painter Turner, and you can barely even see the figures in the, is that taken some of that? Yeah, I couldn't tell if you all were able to see that, if it was blowing out some of the light. But you can barely see some of the small figures in the foreground there and the landscape that really overwhelms those. So I guess if I were thinking about in a sort of dictionary definition of what beauty is for me through the arts, my first introduction to that would be the sublime artists, those sublime landscape painters. So then there's the contemporary artist Kerry James Marshall, Chicago-based African-American artist, whose tenet has been to almost exclusively paint African-American figures in his large-scale, sprawling works. But these aren't simply black figures. They are, as he has stated, quote, emphatically black. He's a product of the 60s, and he believes that black is beautiful. Sorry, that is not Kerry James Marshall. I forget that I put that one in there. That's Gary Cole. Raft of the Medusa. Very famous, not Kerry James Marshall. It's one of my favorite paintings. That's Kerry James Marshall. And so this piece is in the Art Institute's collection. It's called Many Mansions. And it's a reference to, and I wish I had the Bible passage, but I believe it's something like, in my house there are many mansions. So, and I should know that, and I'm presenting for the mission, but I don't know that, so maybe someone else can correct me on that. And so you can see with his works, he is painting black figures, but these are not traditionally painted figures of sort of value representations, light values, dark values. They are essentially extremely emphatically, like he says, black, that idea that black is beautiful. And so that has been his, one of his tenets, is to make sure to make paintings of very black figures, but then also have these paintings enter into public collections. And he's been very successful at that. He's probably the most successful African-American artist alive, contemporary artist. And so his works are in the Art Institute and the Whitney. He's had shows at the MCA Chicago, at the Met. So that would be sort of, in terms of contemporary artists, if I think of beauty, those elements, what I would consider as beautiful, the idea of, culturally, black is beautiful. That's something that resonates with me quite a bit. And so I thought I'd show some of my own work as well. I was really a little bit nervous about showing my own work because I didn't want to put myself in that sort of category with Kerry James Marshall or Gary Cole or Caspar David Friedrich. But there are some things that I've learned from these artists, and there are some things that I also sort of take away from that work. In my own practice, I've focused on the things that I find beautiful, mostly materially beautiful, things like such as wood and a reduced palette of black and gray. So for me, beauty is in part about simplicity. And that's probably, for me, the underlying sort of theme of my talk is this idea that I don't think of beauty in this Aristotelian, idea of symmetry and balance and order and measurable. I don't necessarily think about it as the sublime, being overwhelming, although I do, in the presence of those paintings, I'm really struck by them. But I find beauty in much more sort of subdued, personal ways throughout my life. And so, a few images, and these are actually all from my recent show, my sabbatical show, which was installed in the Moreau Gallery last month. And the show was entitled Wake. It was actually in reference to, or connected to, an author, Christina Sharp, whose work has been about this what she calls as the black ontology of the wake. So these different iterations of the word wake as it relates to blackness and black culture. And for me, the idea of the wake as being related to maritime culture, migration, specifically the boat as it passes through a body of water, leaving in its path a wake. Those are things that I really resonated with in her writing. So as I was putting together my presentation, the analogy I discovered to what I might call beauty was that of a snapshot or a scrapbook. Beauty as defined by small, disparate moments. I find them everywhere, especially here at St. Mary's and the community. So here are some of those beautiful moments. And one of the things I wanted to really emphasize is, I was talking with Sister Eva earlier, and I've been here going on 10 years now. I do really miss Chicago. I miss the energy, I miss my family. I go as often as I can. But I have found community and beauty, and I found that here. And so I think that was something that I really wanted to emphasize as a part of this lecture. So really, these are just sort of a collection of different snapshots and moments for me. This first one was actually from that residency that I did in Omaha back in 2018 at the Bemis Center for the Arts. And they, in order to be a resident, you also had to open up your studio to community groups. So they had a group of, I think they were first and second graders that came through, and they were all over the studio. It was just this great energy. And one of the things that I can also talk about is that when I was in Chicago before I taught at the School of the Art Institute, I taught for 10 years in the Chicago Public Schools. And so it's another thing that I miss. I think also probably running throughout my thinking about beauty is some of the things that I miss. And so some of the things I do miss is working with the small kids, primary school kids. So this was a great moment for me. It's a 3-month residency, and that was really one day, and it's the one thing that really stood out to me in my mind, being able to work with the kids. So also moments shared, obviously, with my students. The main reason that I'm here, the students here are really pretty special. They're incredibly smart, very articulate, very kind as well. They work extremely hard, and so I'm really blessed to be working with them every day. And so this is an image from one of my classes I taught this time last year, called Curatorial Studies, and the students worked with, so it's an AEL course. You all know what AEL courses are. So the students were charged with working with a regional artist who is underserved, and going through all of the steps of what it means to be a curator, and obviously learning what those steps are, and then ultimately curating that artist show in the Moreau Gallery. And so they had to do things like create maquettes for different artists so that they could understand how to lay out the gallery. So this layout of Moreau Gallery, and they were broken up into different groups, and it was really a lot of fun. And I'd never done an AEL course before, so I was very nervous about getting students off campus, getting students back here. But like most things in life, it worked itself out. It wasn't a big deal. The thing that I really loved about this experience that I found really beautiful was I was able to work with students across campus that I had never worked with before. And I don't always get that experience working in the art department. I think sometimes students will take art classes. It's that thing at the beginning of the semester where you go around and ask while you're here, and it's always the Sophia requirement kind of answer that comes up, which I'm fine with, because by the end of that semester usually they've converted, and so I'm fine with that. So it was no different here. Maybe 75% were there because of the AEL, which is a difficult thing for some of them to get, but again, at the end, lots of converts, so I was really excited about that. And then this was actually one of the AEL moments where the students were off campus at the artist studio. The artist is the Elkhart sculptor, Jake Webster. I don't know if any of you had a chance to see his show that was in the gallery. It would have been around this time. Actually, it was after Thanksgiving, so maybe around the end of the semester last year. And his space is sprawling. And I can tell you that none of these students, even the art students, had ever had this kind of experience before. And in their AEL paper that they had to reflect on at the end of the semester, they all wrote about how this was just such a life-changing experience. And I don't typically have classes where students use that sort of terminology, a life-changing experience. So for me, that was a really beautiful moment. And I was really lucky to have a partner like Jake, who is a natural-born performer. If you've ever met him before, he made everything easy. He made all the students comfortable. I tend to be a more serious and focused person, and he is not. And that was great. He's serious about his work, And he is organized. You may think in the studio it's not. He's got his own organization. We didn't spend hours trying to find one thing. He knew where everything was. So that was a great experience for those students and for me as well. And so I just have one slide for an experience I had with an artist in the gallery. So obviously I run the gallery as well. And Mary Zickafoos, I chose this one for a few reasons. One, because she's just an outstanding person, and talk about a beautiful experience. The entire experience working with her was just a joy. It was actually a two-person show with Jane Carney, who's a painter, and it was part of an initiative that I started a few years back called the Alumni Exhibition Program. So she's an alumna. And she and Jane came up with the idea of coming here and doing a group show or a two-person show together. And the work was just beautiful. It's probably the best show visually that I think we've had. It's the best experience that I've had working with artists. Artists are great, but sometimes some difficulties, but not with Mary at all. Very easy. And her lecture, you can kind of tell from the image here, she is just an easy person. She's able to draw people in. I'm really jealous of her ability to do that. I think some of it's just years, some of it's personality. But it was a great experience working with her. And she came back last reunion, and I don't think it was her year. I think she just came back to visit. So I remember seeing her and thinking, who does that? It's just, so she's just this amazing person. It was a really beautiful moment to work with her. And then I wanted to throw in a few images of past students. I really love this image for a few reasons. One, it's of a former student, Anna Volpe. I don't know if any of you have ever worked with her before. She was an art ed major, excellent artist, very organized. In some ways, our personalities really synced very well together. I love it because she's so focused in this picture, and I love focused students. And she was a first year at this time taking a 300 level course, and she held her own. But also, this is a really important image for me because it was taken in February of 2020. So it's one of the last times that I was able to work with students in the classroom before everything obviously shut down, moved to virtual. And some of the work that she produced on her own at home during the pandemic was just really beautiful. And I'm constantly asking her to bring it back so that I can show it to future classes. She was also one of my gallery assistants. So that's her on the far right side of me, and also Abby Mittendorf, and then Hannah O'Farrell. And these are some of my favorite people in the world. I really love them, and I miss them greatly. And I have great gallery workers now. I'm really eager to learn, but I could walk into the gallery and wonder why they weren't in our actual office, and come to find out that they're out in the gallery doing something that they just went on their own initiative to do. So again, really easy, great workers, and just great personality, and they're all doing great things. Anna is finishing up her student teaching, and Abby and Hannah are both in grad school, so very excited for them. And then just other personal things, moments with colleagues and collectors. These are some collectors that I met with in St. Louis when I was there, when one of my works entered into the SLAM collection for the first time, so I was very excited by that. So this was a small dinner, and so I was happy to be in their presence. And then friends / colleagues / friends, my chair, Julie, who's been instrumental to pretty much all of my success here. I couldn't imagine really being a successful 10-year plus professor in the art department without Julie's help. She's incredibly focused. She and I share a lot of temperament as well. I think she's more up there. I'm just kind of getting to that point. Maybe in a few more years I'll be there. But she's incredibly organized, very fair, and and she's someone that I would consider a friend as well as a colleague. And then her husband, Bill Tortolot, who teaches at IUSB, who I've become really good friends with. He's a printmaker as well, so we share a lot of those interests. And then just some of my own friends. So my friend Regina Gloria, who's an artist, who actually also showed in our gallery a few years back. We were at a Cubs game earlier this year in May. That's why we're all bundled up. And the Cubs lost, but that's okay. It's always fun to go to a game, even when the Cubs, if you only went to games when Cubs won. But although they were okay this year, but we'll see what happens next year. And then another friend, Marina, who teaches at the University of Colorado in Boulder, an excellent painter, very smart, also really focused on her work. And so she smiles, I see her more serious, so it was nice to see a moment of her smiling as we were celebrating her birthday. And then, of course, my family. So I wanted to have some images of my family, who I miss and visit as much as I can. My sister Dina, her son, my nephew Joshua, my mom, my sister Latanja, at my mom's birthday dinner, my brother Parrish and Dina, and then me, flanked with my mom and my sister. And I forgot that I put in some images of my dog, or not my dog, my sister's dog. I wish it was my dog, Thor. I always throw these in when I can, when it's appropriate, because he's such a good boy. He tries so hard to be very good, and he's very big, and he's one of these big dogs who wants to be small, so he doesn't understand why people are pushing him away, because he's just so big, and he looks so serious, but he's a real goofball, so I love him. So those are my small moments of beauty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Whoops. This is I don't know how, oh, there we go. There we go. This is called Invite Dark Night to Supper. And you'll find out what on earth that has to do with beauty. Ian and I make and tend within our work the practices of beauty. That's beauty all in caps, beauty in its fullest signification. As makers of beauty, we read the signs of the times and align ourselves to them through resemblance or likeness. Edgar, the good brother in King Lear, has perfect words for this. We must obey the weight of this sad time. A hard task. Of late, images and sounds of the war in Israel and Gaza on TV make a weight within ourselves. Just Sunday evening, Anderson Cooper showed a photograph of a woman who had a blanket wrapped around herself, and she had 2 children tied within that blanket, about a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, and then a small baby. I will never forget her face. It was, she clearly was terrified, but she also had that strength in her face. I am going to save these children if it kills me. It was that kind of firmness and fortitude. And yes, I'm going to call this the dark night of the world, and I have knowingly pilfered a mighty term from spiritual writers. I will suggest that the dark night of the world these days, as the subject of art, is somewhat like the dark night of the soul. Its weight we must obey, if, that is, we want to make beauty now in our time. In order to make, we must keep watch over the world. The world's strange mutations fill us with stuff for meditation, even contemplation. And Ian gave us many images we can think about. We must balance joy and horror these days. Out of that strange mix of energy, we make art. The beauty of the natural world is also a place we must inhabit deeply. We must keep watch over its waters, mountains, animals, trees, flowers, its full ecosystem. By making beauty out of what we find in nature, we keep watch over the natural world. My first point of descriptive reference for how to keep watch in our now, our present time, comes surprisingly from Hamlet, or maybe not surprisingly. Ophelia, after Hamlet's abject, abusive rejection of her in Act 3, Scene 1, often she says this, speaking straight at us as the audience, "Oh, woe is me, to have seen what I have seen, to see what I see." Ophelia is the walking, restless, book-reading young witness to all manner of secrets and death plot. To have seen what I have seen, to see what I see, notice her shift into the present tense, is enough to drive Ophelia's mad songs to their pivotal, poignant question: how should I my true love know from another one? Indeed, seeing what she sees, how is she to know who or what is trustworthy? Or worse yet, how can she recognize what is love and what is not? How can she know who is dead and who is not? Some are buried hugger-mugger, some are disappeared. Her brother, her father, Hamlet, dead or missing. She knows enough to sing, "Here's rue for you," and finally drown. Her knowing shuts up sense. However, sense has not been so shut up that she hasn't had great opportunity in wild, whirling words to make herself fully clear. She will hand out all the flowers of herself with ironic aptness to the occasion. She remakes herself to fit the time of mourning, of terror. The wonder is that she has endured so long, she who is young. Like the other young persons we know, the music festival goers in Israel, the young people in Gaza. This moment of play reference illuminates some features of our time. So what then is this time like? Imagine in your own mind our time of strange mutations and blindfolded men, women, even children. Think of that word, blind and folded, as if some essential part of the human is wrapped up and put away. In Hamlet, a young Ophelia watches and watches and says, "Woe is me to see what I see." And by implication, since we, the spectators, watch, woe are we as well if we see what she sees. How should I, how should you, your true love know, or any love know, in this, our world? Our world, our time of bad trade, terror, night shrieks at supper, now time, our time, yours and my time, a time in which the young, it seems, like Ophelia, play fool to sorrow. This playtime has severe hallmarks. Edgar in King Lear outlines them for us very carefully. Who is it can say, "I am at the worst"? I am worse than e'er I was, and worse I may be yet. His severe words, "I am not at the worst. Although Edgar stands there on stage with his eye-gouged father, he is still standing up. Consequently, he can expect more suffering, more ruin. He says, worse I may be yet, and worse may yet come. Cheers to Edgar for clearing up the matter of tragedy in such simple sentences. He and we stand in a world where people die faster than the flowers on their heads. Consequently, we need to invent some songs, art of our own for safekeeping. Be like Edgar, be like Ophelia, so that we may endure, so that we may help the young among us. Write poems, paint, take up photography, plant wildflowers, make a garden or a farm. Sing, sing as loudly as you can. Make beauty. Make beauty, make song, make Kaddish. So how to begin? The first step toward beauty, Michael Ondaatje says in his novel, Aniel's Ghost, is this: stop invasions of ourselves. How does one do that in our time? How can we make and maintain a space, a safe space, from which we can make beauty? To make that space of knowing the self, my proposal is this: take the dark night of the world and make it into the dark night of yourself. Make friends. Invite dark night to supper. Sit down and have a transformative conversation. Invite a bold metamorphosis. Be bold, but be not too bold. To make the dark night within us, we must keep Ondaatje's necessary rule: stop invasions of ourselves. By extending a courteous invitation to the dark, a very specific dark, world dark. You are its brave and gorgeous hostess. Lay out the table linens, choose the flowers, open the door, take the coats, offer a seat by the fire. To accept the invitation, your mind, your soul, must make itself in accordance with the principles of beauty, the principles of art. Warning, this is not theology. This is the spiritual practice of making beauty, and it's tough work. Making beauty is the soul work of the arts. In making these days, we must invite dark night to supper. And then the really scary part: you eat together. Dark night and you. You eat, take into the mouth of your heart, embody, digest, make out of yourself a world. Take into your deepest creative self the world offered you so that you may make your art. You wait and wait in deepest recollection, in the deepest room of yourself. You make a time of repair, of tendering beauty. Seamus Heaney calls this creative moment far-offness coming close to us. You make a time of abandonment and forsaking, a walk in moon shadow. You make a time in which you use the hum of the wound of the world as the matter of your art. These are big sentences. I will repeat myself. Use the hum of the wound of the world, also the wound within yourself. Out of that soul work, make beauty, make art. So how to do that? Ondaatje, in his novel Aniel's Ghost, has a character called Ananda. His work is to paint the face of the Buddha. And when you do that, you have to not face the Buddha. You do it with the Buddha's face behind you. And so you have to practice. So what does he do? He chooses a room to prepare himself for this holy work. That room is the model I will use for this soul work. On one wall of the room, someone has scrawled the Sinhala word Makamkruka, a churner, an agitator, one who sees things more truly by turning everything upside down. Oddly, the churner has the power to guard the holy. On the opposite wall, someone has scrawled the Sinhala word Madanaraga with the speed of love or sexual arousal. One who makes herself capable of art keeps these two powers in balance in her I, E-Y-E, and her I, capital I. Makamkruka, let me say the words again. One who sees by turning upside down. And Madaraga, one who has the speed of love. To take in the world of the dark night, we agitate and turn the stuff of the world upside down. We flip self on self. We light the candles of the dark so that the holy is safeguarded. We do this with the speed of Eros. Anne Carson says, in such a moment, beauty comes out of unexpectedness and stares at us. Those of us who have the gift of making beauty, and those who want to understand beauty, that's everybody, especially those who are young among us, are invited by this gift to open the door of the room of making. It's a long trek there. The moment of arrival is strange. I tell my students in the past, open the door with care. Slowly. Sometimes the door is stuck and you have to put your shoulders against it and use your whole body to push it open. Look at the words on the wall. Being in this room requires that you take its energies into yourself. You agitate, turn things upside down, so that you may see things more truly. The artist, the poet, makes scribbles. I tell my students, scribble, 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 before you get to the computer. I don't know how to scribble on a computer. The artist, the poet, makes scribbles. She churns with deep meanings. She enables herself to make and know in the dark. However, she must bring herself to another space, a place I call the room of halt, H-A-L-T. Staying in this room is really tough, so let me explain it more fully, and keep in mind my pilfered term. This space, this room, is like and unlike the dark night of the soul. Dark night is an event within the soul that is an acutely felt absence of God. As such, it is, I think, the hallmark descriptor of the contemporary world, the super billboard sign of our times. The maker of art must dare to bring the dark night of the world, what is out there, to the place where the hurry is stopped in there, within herself. There is a night within the night. Then she must bring the dark night out again in her poem, her painting, her garden, her music, her architectural drawings. So how do you come to this room of halt? We come by deep attention and deep attraction to the stirrings of the world. We settle in that room by fitting those stirrings into the nodes, if you will, of heart, imagination, and intellect. Fitting is the necessary hard work. Only then is it possible to make a space within the self for seeing the world. Tom Stoppard, in his play Coast of Utopia, says, "Art and the summer lightning of individual happiness, these are the only real goods we have." That's a mighty thought. Keep it in mind. I'm going to be risky here and add to it. In King Lear, Edgar also speaks of art. When his father asks him who he is, remember his father is blind, His eyes have been poked out. Edgar answers, I am the one who is pregnant to good pity by the art of known and feeling sorrows. That's an astonishing answer. What on earth does pregnant to good pity mean? What Tom Stoppard and Shakespeare have in common is this. Art has something to do with deep, deep stirrings, known and feeling sorrows within the self, known and feeling joys within the self. Each single stirring then is not just motion, but a sudden motion, the strike of lightning and the strike of pity. To make art, to make beauty, we must most profoundly know the lightning strike within the creative moment and also the strike of pity. And I'm going to haul this word out of our usual use of it. And that hauling out is the lyric gesture by which we acknowledge the bliss of holding what one loves, at once keen, nothing instant, everything prolonged. We must allow that prolonged drawing off, sentence by sentence, image by image. Stoppard adjusts attention to the felt reception of the lightning strike of joy. Shakespeare suggests attention to the strike of pity. Both playwrights give us then something peculiar to tend or tender. The strike of joy, the strike of good pity. Let's take those descriptors forward into the makings of the soul art and see if we can construct a way in which the dark night of the world can be brought to the place where hurry is stopped, is tendered. Now remember, my primary metaphor here, invite dark night to supper. If my words seem dark, they are. My task here is to be honest, particularly with those who are young, are new seers of the dark. All I can offer them and you for the making of hope is art, the practice and discipline of stirring the dark night, of tending the dark night, of remaking the world by taking in the dark night. I'd like to extend that metaphor some more. Imagine then that the world is both the cause of breakage and the antidote to breakage. The world is the night within the night, and that night we may or may not find far-offness coming close. Seamus Heaney suggests elsewhere we have to dip a finger into the river of time. When lifted, your hand tenders what he calls far-offness, or it finds a wound, a place of want within. That wound is the mark of grace. Think of Isaiah, his mouth burned and charred. Jacob rests with an angel and for his troubles gets a broken hip socket. After God wrestling, he limps and has to get himself where he was going before he lay down to sleep and got wounded by angel or God. I always feel for him, poor chap. Dip a finger into the river of time and it comes back, affording entrance to pity. Pity here is a word I want to haul back with wider meanings. Pity is the gesture by which we acknowledge the bliss of holding what one loves. So hurry hollow, I love that word. It's hyphenated. Hurry hollow. Let's add to that. Pity is the consolation we make and tender when we discipline the fingers of the soul and the fingers of the body to that which is far-offness. Pity is a gesture towards the acknowledgement of bliss, a gesture that moves us towards making beauty. The energy pity makes is the energy of art. Pity moves us toward repair. Repair is a bit of a gamble. One can go too far. As Elliot Riley observes, it's only by going too far that we find out how far we can go. In repair, the artist risks that the structures of things will come apart all over her. She risks making real damage. Repair requires alchemy, exactitude of hand, and a reseeing of the internal geography of the self and the world. Then the artist can receive the muse I call Ms. Fix-It, she who sits on the shoulders of the makers. I always think, I got that. My muse sitting right there on the left shoulder, unless my cat moves her off. Repair contains some deep ironies. And you think about, repair can damage the original, as in a rare painting, or it can halt decay, as in a bridge. Repair is the creative destruction of brokenness. Repair is also one of the first requirements for taking in the dark night. A maker of beauty must re-see her world. That calls for vision that sees in the dark, and strong hands that scrape off rust and gunk, and sometimes the kind of intelligence that can read the damn instruction manual. When one takes in the internal structure of the dark night world, one must in the same instant give entrance to the tendering of pity. In that moment of affording interest, one must both repair and make. What I suggest here is that makers of beauty, especially our young makers, have a huge and risky task. They must strip off decay and at the same time make art. How do they do that? How do you as artist teacher do that? Or artist maker? Or artist student? Take in the dark night. Watch. How do you manage or survive the dark night? You watch. How do you tender the dark night? You keep the watch. How do you repair within the dark night? You keep the watch. That's the stuff of art. Only then can you name what's happened to you. So let's try this. Let's have a little fun naming things. For God, the ravishing far near. Marguerite Porete, medieval mystic. For fiat, if it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. Hamlet. For grief, those people who have lost someone look naked because they think themselves invisible. Joan Didion. For taking upon us the mystery of things, moving on in the dark like loaded boats at night. Though there is no course, there is boundlessness. Emily Dickinson. For turnings from ruin, we women, me and you, tell me something real. Don't just say I'm grown and ought to know. I don't. I'm 50 and I don't know nothing. Toni Morrison. Jazz. For color that opens out and sews itself shut in the instant, Rothko. For circumference of the heart, Ella Fitzgerald, singing anything. I could go on, so can you, more abundantly, naming color, tone, note, angle, eye, sonnet, epic, number. That's a big order. We can sag under it. Nevertheless, it's ours to do. Ours. Give me the names for things. Just give me their real names. Not what we call them, but what they call themselves when no one's listening. That's Charles Wright. Then after of naming, let the names break apart all over you. Sometimes what happens next is eclipse. Very odd things happen in eclipse. The sun disappears. It leaves us. We are forsaken by light. We might ask, this is Anne Carson describing this creative moment that's rare, Would it be like waking from a dream and finding yourself on the back of your own mind? There, in that moment, you can find your art, your practices of beauty. Invite dark night for supper. Thank you.
Oh no, don't trip. Okay, good. Wow, thank you so much, Sister Eva and Ian. We are right at time, so if you have questions, maybe you both can hang around and just answer them personally. And this was so beautiful, Ian, you started out by naming different aspects of beauty through the sublime, through the simple, and then through the different relationships, including your sister's dog, which I really loved. And then Eva really inviting us to claim that darkness and the making of beauty, and that through navigating our dark map, we repair and transform that night into beautiful things. So it's just a wonderful way to close our profiles for this semester. I want to thank Mary. I want to thank all of our IT team, everybody joining us via Zoom. We will gather back together in the spring. We have an exciting lineup of speakers again that we will announce towards the end of this semester. And as always, if you have any nominations for people you want to hear from, bring them forth and we will invite them to come speak. Have a lovely November day and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much.